Hi. How's it going? I'm a bit nervous. I'm going to try my best. Okay. I'm going to talk a bit about inclusion. I'm also going to just assume what everyone means. It's like the better version of diversity. I don't know. I know. But I'm going to start with some excuses that I've heard whenever I've talked about diversity and inclusion in arts organisations. So, excuse one, it's a meritocracy. We only hire the best people for the jobs, and I'm always puzzled by this idea of a meritocracy. Like, is it a meritocracy? Do we believe that the arts? Do we believe that the country is a meritocracy? Do we believe that everyone who feels like they want to apply for a job or be part of some programming gets to throw their hat in the ring, or do we feel like some people are excluded? I often think about publishing, where I do the majority of my work. Publishing relies on this meritocracy excuse quite a lot, and I always think, well, yeah, you obviously can pick the best CV from the people who were able to do a free internship for a year in London, one of the most expensive cities in the country, and probably live with their parents. Yeah, that's definitely a whole range of a whole cross section of society. I often feel that the people who sit back and go, well, it's a meritocracy. They're also the people who, at parties, are like, I don't see colour actually. All lives matter actually. Because I don't believe that it is a meritocracy. When I did a big diversity event at the Bloomsbury Institute years and years ago for Writer Centre Norwich, we were sitting with a publishing director from a really, really big publishing house, and I was talking about how I thought the meritocracy myth was, I thought it was rubbish, and she said, well, you know, my entire 40-year career, I've never once been sent a CV by a black girl. Those were her exact words. And I was going to pull her up on it, because I wanted to say, how do you know that? But a woman stood up in the audience, a black woman, and she said, hi, my name is, and I'm changing her name to protect the innocent, because this is not my story to tell, but I was just a witness to this. She said, hi, my name is something like Anna Johnson. I've applied to work for your publishing house 7 times, and I've never got as much as an interview, and I have no idea how you'd know from my CV that I'm black. So that's what I say to the idea of a meritocracy. Another excuse I've heard is, oh yeah, inclusion, it's just very tokenistic. It's very, very tokenistic, isn't it? And I just want to lay out very, very clearly what the difference between tokenism and inclusion is for people who have said, oh yeah, you know, it's just very tokenistic. Tokenism is basically when you have when you're interviewing 7 people for a job and you go, oh, we've got all got a short list of all white men we're interviewing. Maybe we should just interview one Asian person. Can we just find one Asian person to interview just so we can say we've done that? That's tokenism. Do you know what inclusion is? Not having that problem in the first place. Another excuse that I've heard is, well, our program is very diverse, or our output is very, very inclusive. And I often think, well, publishers have said, well, we've got an Indian writer publishing this year. And I often think, well, diversity isn't just about what you see in front of the camera or what you see on the shelves. Diversity and inclusion, it's about what happens behind the shelves. The people who paint the walls. That was a bad example. Diversity is about the people who make the books, and diversity is about the people who make the films. I mean, I don't know if anyone remembers that there was that program on HBO, Project Greenlight, where Matt Damon was talking to a black film producer, and she was talking about the importance of having a black director, and he stressed that it was actually more important to have diversity in front of the camera. And the problem is, if you just have a person of colour or a person from a marginalised background in front of the camera or on the shelf, but the entire team that's made it is not from a very diverse background, then all that person is just a diverse face for your voice. It doesn't make it any less diverse. I wanted to talk a little bit about a project I worked on with the Watershed called Rife. which is a youth magazine created by under 24-year-olds for under 24-year-olds, and it's a magazine. I don't work there anymore. But the project basically employs young people in 6-month paid internships to create content for this magazine, be it videos or be it articles and essays. And one of the things that was really, really great about Rife was 2/3 of the young journalists that we worked with were from a BAME background. They were 100% young because of the funding, and it was majority female, I think. Well, no, I know. I say I think. I know. And to the point where we had four young black women leave London, where all these creative jobs are supposed to be, to come and live in Bristol for 6 months, just because we had provided them with an opportunity to have an entry-level job in the creative industries. And the thing that I thought at the time was, we're not doing anything special. I don't understand, we're very good at being inclusive without having to signpost the fact that we're being inclusive. We're not doing anything special. So what is the problem? But actually, when I thought about it, actually we were doing some things that were helping us get people in the room. First of all, we made specific invitations. So we didn't just advertise our roles on our social media and within our networks. We tried to widen our networks. We went into schools, we went into colleges, we went to community leaders and youth clubs that had access to young people from a specific background. And that specific invitation, it does this very, very simple psychological trick of making people feel invited into a space. So whether often people will see a project and they won't necessarily think it's for them, but by making that specific invitation in a space that they feel is comfortable, or a space that belongs to them, it does many wonderful things for ensuring that they might then want to apply for a job with you, for example. Secondly, when we were advertising jobs, we used very, very diverse imagery. How many times have we seen something go viral because it's a panel of white dude tech bros, and the provocation at the back says, "Where are all the black people?" And that was an actual one from a big tech conference last year. But how many times have we seen that? But so we ensured that the imagery we used to advertise these jobs was inclusive and diverse. And the third thing is very simple. We didn't set any parameters around who could apply. We just wanted people with good ideas. We didn't care if you had a university degree. We didn't care about your A-levels. We didn't care if this was your first ever job. We just wanted people who had great ideas and were enthusiastic. And when you remove barriers to applying, when I think about publishing specifically and entry-level jobs in publishing would insist on people having an English literature degree or having done work experience and all the rest of it. But if you're trying to find an entry-level job and people are saying, "What is your experience?" and you're like, "But it's an entry-level job. The whole point is that I don't have any experience." Or, if you're applying for an internship and people are saying, "Well, what else have you done?" And you're like, "It's an internship. I'm trying to do this. I'm working in size right now in order to pay for me to do this." So by removing the barrier, the entry criteria for Rife, we ended up with people from a wide degree of backgrounds, but we still weren't perfect, and we still had to constantly ask ourselves, who's not in the room? We were very good on BAME representation, but were we as good on representation around disability? Were we as good on representation around class? Interestingly, were we as good at representation on white men? We were terrible. We employed 2 of them. The counter to that is whenever I'm in spaces in publishing, there'll always be a guy who comes up to me and goes, "It's so unfashionable to be a straight white man these days." And you're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, life is so tough for you." That sucks. Imagine. I I just wanted to talk a little bit about quotas and monitoring. So I've always been against like monitoring forms and like equality monitoring. Oh God, I better hurry up. Equality monitoring forms. But I did a panel with David Olusoga, and he said a really interesting thing that kind of blew my mind. I'm just going to throw it out there, whether any of us 100% agree with it. It's just a different perspective. He said that in France they don't do any monitoring around what your racial background is, what your social background is, what class you're from, whether you have a disability. You're just considered French, and therefore it makes it very hard to identify where inequality lies. If you're all French, therefore inequality cannot be given any nuance. And so by having endless equality monitoring forms in the UK, places are able to identify where inequality is. I mean, it's then up to the government to do something about it, but that's another story for another talk. And the other thing about quotas, if places have quotas, I would only trust those places that have quotas that have some sort of long-term aim. If they aim to, by say 2025, have achieved this much change, or you want quotas to have some sort of long-term aim rather than just be like a short-term reactive thing. I'm going to go on. I really don't think that inclusion is that hard. Often people talk about having a seat at the table, and that idea of a seat at the table causes a lot of friction. A lot of us have probably heard the saying, to the people with privilege, equality feels like oppression. And I've often heard like the racist version of that, which is diversity equals white genocide. And those things to me suppose that there is a table. That table has 7 chairs around it. Currently, that table has 7 white people sitting around this chair, or 7 people from the majority background sitting around that chair. And diversity is coming and saying, you and you, get up and leave the table. We're going to add like a disabled person, a black person, and a working class person to sit at this table. That is not, for me, that's not what inclusion is. Inclusion for me is like putting more chairs around the table. Inclusion for me is like, oh, that table is looking a bit crowded because of all those chairs. Let's make the table bigger. Inclusion for me is, oh, that table doesn't exist. It's just a construct. It's just a metaphor. It doesn't matter. It's a thing getting in the way of inclusion. So that thing about a seat at the table, the number of seats and the size of the table is entirely down to the limits of your imagination. So I'm just going to end very quickly on what you can do now while you are emerging, or I hate the word emerging. You're all leaders. You're leaders in waiting. You're leaders waiting for our generation to die out so you can take your rightful places. Okay, so I'm going to end with like 4 things that you can do now. 1, always support. Always support. If you see a project that you like, signal boost it, buy a ticket for it, buy a copy of it, buy my books. I've got books, by the way. Support that person. If there's a writer whose work you love reading, signal boost it, tell your friends about it. That is one really, when you're talking to people who are gatekeepers, put that artist's name forward. That is a simple thing that you can do. 2, always wonder who is not in the room, who is not at the table, as it were. And when you wonder that, wonder it out aloud. Make sure other people hear you wonder who is not in the room. Number 3, very simple, don't feel like you have to speak on behalf of others, and don't let your voice be representative of an entire community, because I am not the spokesperson for all people of colour. I'm not the spokesperson for South Asians. I'm not the spokesperson for British Asians. I'm not even the spokesperson for British Asians whose dads were born in Kenya, their mums were born in Aden, they were born in Wembley, but they grew up in Harrow, and they went to university in East London, and then they lived in South London, then North London, and then now they live in Bristol. I'm not even the voice of those guys. I'm my voice. And finally, if you're hoping to be in a position where you can bring people through, there's 3 types of people you can be. Like, all of them, sadly, in this construct involve being let in the door. So there's 3 types of person you can be. Someone can open the door and invite you in, and you go in. You can either A, close the door behind you and go off and do your thing. B, you could ensure the door is left open but walk away and do your thing. Or C, you could be let in the door, walk through the door, jam your foot in the door, get your megaphone from out your pocket and start shouting for other people to come through. Because that is what we should all be doing, and that is how we will achieve inclusion. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.